Say. All right, last week I took a direction that went away from Galatians, and I decided that I'm going to take a little bit of a turn for a few weeks and talk about spiritual warfare, okay? Especially because of where I'm at. And I think I want to focus specifically not just on prayer and fasting, but I want to focus on how the enemy works. So I'd like each week to just look at how the enemy works in your life. How does he do certain things? What are the tools that he uses, and how should we respond as a Christian? And then we'll jump back into our schedule. Is that okay? All right, so we're going to take a little bit of time in spiritual warfare. I also think it's appropriate for the age that we live in, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm reluctantly going to bring it up because I'm not one that talks much about eschatology and end times. I don't do that very often because I'm not comfortable with it fully myself. I just don't want to believe that the world is ending, Joy. So I hate to be one of those people that say it's the end. But I'm looking at things and I'm saying something's up, okay? So first, let's just create a framework for spiritual warfare. When we talk about spiritual warfare, it's in a sense uniquely Christian. You know, we're Judeo-Christian, 74% of our Bible is the Old Testament. But when we talk about warfare, it's almost uniquely Christian. The tone so changes that the New Testament shifts its focus from building a people with an ethnic, national, spiritual identity to combating an enemy. Okay? God in the Old Testament draws focus to himself. Good things are from him. Bad things for Israel are from him. He would say, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. But he also said, I'm the fashioner and former of the weapon. He resisted drawing attention to what Paul would call the God of this world. He resisted drawing attention to any other gods because he had to draw attention to himself. But when we get into the New Testament, we see this subtle shift. And it's almost like a trust. We begin in this dispensation to be trusted with this additional knowledge, this reality that there's these minor gods, that the sons of God are actively working against us, these powerful agents. So important is this concept that 1 John 3:8 goes so far as to say, for this purpose the Son of God was made manifested to what? Destroy the works of the enemy, of the devil. To destroy the works of the enemy. You think about the power of that verse. It doesn't say for this reason the Son of God was made manifest to forgive your sins, to die on the cross, right? All of this is part of it, right? To forgive your sins, to die on your cross, to resurrect. It doesn't say that. It says to destroy the works of the devil, which means all of those things work in conjunction to destroy the works of the devil. When John defines the purpose of Jesus, he says he came for one thing, to take down this minor god, to destroy what he did. Now that's a radical statement. That's a radical statement, but it is the appropriate framework. It's reflected also in Paul in 2 Corinthians. Paul says that the God of this world, he says the devil who is the God of this world has blinded people to the light of the gospel. That's a radical thing to say. And we know that Paul said it because we know that Paul wrote 2 Corinthians. If this was Colossians or Ephesians, some people would try to debate it. If this was in the Timothy's, but this is in one of the verified, guaranteed, out of Paul's hand letters. We know that this reflected his personal thinking, that the God of this world was blinding people to the light of the gospel. So we have to have a framework where we understand and can reflect on the concept of an enemy. And to say that there's a God of this world, it's interesting because the very things that God wanted to avoid in the Old Testament actually started occurring in the New Testament. When we got engaged to spiritual warfare, we also had to engage in a heresy called Gnosticism. And so we can see why God withheld some of this information. And some early Christians became Gnostics, where they believed that the creator God, Yahweh, was actually a false God, what they would call a demiurge. They believed he was a bad guy, and Christ was sent to liberate us from the bad guy. So see, even as Christians, we weren't mature enough. Some of us weren't mature enough to take the information that we were dealing with the whole spectrum and class of sons of God and people. And so they would go and take that information and they actually turned it into a bad doctrine, a very harmful doctrine, where they turned against the very God that would liberate them. And they separated the Father from the Son. And they believed some crazy and dangerous things that we'll talk about another week. But you can see why God had to be very careful in what he revealed to his people, because even at the right time, some people took it and went the wrong way. There's this weird tendency to worship whatever has power. Just worship the first thing that has power in your life. I'm glad that the first thing that showed up in my life was Jesus. I'm glad that I didn't see any other power, because I advocate a very personal gospel. I advocate a gospel of experience. If I had experienced some other power, I would have just been following that other power. That was the type of person I am. It has to be overcome by the most powerful man. I needed to see the strongest strong man. Thank God Jesus is the strongest strong man. He came in and bound everything else in my life. Otherwise, I'd be like a dog on a leash going with whoever did what for me. Fortunately for me, Jesus is the only one that ever did anything for me. He's the only one that does things for me now. It's only in his name that I have power. It's in his name that I see things change. It's in his name that I overcome the evil that works against me. But there are people who follow lesser things because of the power that they perceive that they have. How much time do I have? All right, that's taken 7 minutes. That's an introduction. Let's see, 10 minutes. I'm gonna skip a framework, the additional framework. We're just gonna go on a little bit. But I'd like over the course of a few weeks to maybe explore hypothetically a framework for what happened. Especially like when Jesus says in Luke 10:18, I saw Satan fall from heaven, right? Does that give us insight into what happened? How exactly did the devil become the god of this world? What does that mean? What's the extent of his powers? What's his limitations? But I think turning for a second towards contemporary events and the eschatology or the end times aspect of it, I have to get weird with you guys. I'm gonna get weird and then I'm gonna get personal. And Tawana, I know I love looking at your face whenever I bring this up, but you know what I gotta bring up, Elder? You know what I have to bring up? I'm bringing up aliens, folks. I'm bringing up aliens. I've gotta bring it up. Y'all look at me like I'm crazy every time, so I bite my tongue, but here we go. I'm bringing up aliens again. Because there is something happening in the world right now. There is something that is conditioning the human mind, and it's intensifying, okay? And what's interesting is that atheism had a quick rise in the 20th century, and it's having a quick decline. It's having a quick decline. But it's declining along with Christianity, and something else is stepping into the picture. Something else, I'm gonna prove it to you. Not only did we have declassified reports or classified reporting from Congress people who come out to talk about things, and a congresswoman went so far as to say, don't think extraplanetary, think interdimensional, okay? I'm coming back, I'm not getting weird, I'm not starting a cult, I promise. You're already part of the greatest cult that ever existed, Christianity. All right, she says, think interdimensional. And everybody's, ooh, what does that mean? What is interdimensional? Now, every Christian already believes this. But I want you to understand something. Every Christian already believes in interdimensional beings. We call them angels, and we call them demons. We have the framework for understanding what's happening, okay? I'm gonna get there in a second. But then I'm going to buy some honeycombs at Publix, Rachel. Just going to mind my own business, buy some honeycombs, and I see the USA Today. I see two things on the front page that just grab my attention and really speak to where we're at, okay? Kentucky City Beams ad inviting UFOs to come for blues and bourbon. Ha 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 ha, it's so cute. So cute, inviting UFOs. Y'all come on down here and we'll drink some whiskey, right? We'll have a good time and check out blues. That's the fun cutesy article. But here on the top left, it says spiritual cult puzzle grows more ominous. And it's a story about young girls who are going missing because they're joining a cult that is now being investigated for potential homicides, that is now being investigated for murders, that these girls are healthy, that they're normal, they have kids, they end up leaving their families, they end up disappearing. And this cult has 200,000 followers on YouTube. And what is it called? It's called something along the lines, it's called something along the lines of like the spiritual consciousness something, right? And what does it incorporate into its beliefs? Aliens. Yeah, what does it incorporate into its beliefs? Well, what is the secret doctrine of the Nation of Islam? What does Farrakhan talk about that Elijah Muhammad went to? The mothership. They believe that there's a mothership that's going to come and rescue the people that are part of the nation. When you look at some of the trends that are happening, when I go on YouTube now, because I've watched some of these news reports, there's this organization called Gaia that puts ads on my YouTube, right? And those ads teach me how I can use my spirit being to reach out and make contact with extraterrestrials, right? With other creatures, and here's the thing, Christianity's declining, and in its stead is coming this ambiguous spirituality that's reaching out to anything that looks vaguely powerful. Let me tell you something, when you reach out, they will make contact. They will make contact. And if you reach out in the name of Jesus, you're gonna be reaching out and making contact with the creatures of light, the sons of God who did not rebel. And they're gonna be at your service. But when you reach out anywhere else, you're gonna make contact with forces that you think that you wanted to know, but you didn't. Let me say this. I think that there is something happening in the framework of the world that is creating a situation for a false Messiah. I believe it's creating a situation for the false Messiah. And the reason that I'm harping the aliens thing is it ties into other things, okay? I'll get to practical points. But there's a part of me as a pastor that wants you to talk to your kids. I want you to talk to your kids and I want them to get ready. Because these things are intensifying to such a degree that I believe when you look at what's going on in Israel, okay, and on the world stage, how that fits with some of the things in the Bible, and you look at what's going on with the spiritual consciousness of human beings, it's setting up a rescuer from above. It's setting up somebody from the stars to come and save humanity, okay? And here's what you need to teach your kids. I don't care what you see in the world. I don't care what you see on the news. I don't care what shows up in your yard. There's one person who already saved you. There's only one place to gain salvation from. There's only one person who should lead you, and his name is Jesus. If they don't call him Jesus, they better call him Yeshua. If they don't call him Yeshua, they better call him Jesus. However, it better be the man we know. Because he's the only one we gave us. We don't have to look above for somebody to save us. We have to look behind us 2,000 years ago for a man who was born in the flesh and died on a cross. And so I'm seeing this deception rise. And I'm looking at it and I'm watching as I think our children are gonna be susceptible to these false messiahs, to what's potentially rolling out to be the Antichrist. And it's fascinating because the one thing that's ending in all this is the idea that there's nothing else besides us. That's the one idea that's going away. The one idea is that's leaving us, Rachel, is that we're all alone in this thing. So now we have to deal with the spiritual framework and reality. And Christians can't sit back and be silent upon this. Christians can't sit back and look as though we don't know and this is some kind of separate concept. We've dealt with this. This is just another pagan religion rising up. This is just another false gospel rising up. And so we have already everything that people need. People should not be looking to the stars for their power and their salvation. You know who they should be looking at? You. You who are full with the power of the Holy Spirit and reflect the Son of God. You should be in their life saying, let me show you power. Let me pray with you. Let you see miracles. Let you see the healing gospel of Jesus Christ. Let me show you how God really works. Let me show you how you are already made an overcomer. Let me show you how you already have life eternal. That needs to be you, and your kids need to be sure, because I think that this framework is coming to such an extent that we're in for an inevitable battle. We're in for an inevitable battle, and it's a battle that we're already engaged in as a church at an everyday level. The way that the enemy works with most people is deception. He works a little bit differently with the church. Let me, before I go ahead, let's just say, okay, so the world is coming, Rachel, to the conclusion that there are forces, right? Now we have to deal with the nature of these forces. Bryson, I'm gonna show the favorite video for you, son. I'm gonna show that video that creeped you out. We have to deal with the reality that within our realm of existence, there are things, right? Both benevolent and malevolent that can both see, perceive, and interact with us. Do we have this video? It's an interesting way to put it.
This two-dimensional creature has locked some precious gems away in a safe. She's checked the safe from every angle and is sure that no one will be able to break in without a key. But she hasn't taken into account the idea that a three-dimensional creature, such as myself, might be peering in from above. She doesn't even know the concept of above. I could steal these gems without a key and without damaging the safe, and she would have no idea how they were taken. We should keep an eye out for ourselves. A four-dimensional creature could steal from our safes without a key, could take the yolk from an egg without breaking the shell, appear in a closed room, or see inside of our brains. The fourth dimension is perpendicular to all of our normal 3D space directions, and we have no walls up against that direction.
Does she say that in the most creepy way possible, Goldie? Bryson was like, I always understood the concept of spiritual entities being able to see into my world. He said, but that video made it as creepy as possible. He said, but it's interesting because we're looking into the possibility, right, of people who can interact within our realm. Now, I need you to see something. We believe that a man rose from the dead. We believe that a guy lived in the belly of a whale for 3 days. Geez, the videos of mine. We believe that the sun stood still. We believe that a sea parted, right? We believe that people were healed from deadly diseases. We believe that not only did Jesus raise back from the dead, but he raised Lazarus from the dead. We believe that there's a force that can interact with this world and change its rules, right? I personally have witnessed miracles that were inexplicable by science. I've seen enough of them in my life to verify and validate my religion and my beliefs. I've seen enough of them. So I know that there's some power that can interact with this world and change the rules of that world, okay? But what's interesting is that there's not only a power of good, obviously, there's a power of evil. And I talked a lot extensively about the power of evil last week, and I emphasized that. But one of the things that I said, Crystal, is that it cannot overcome me. It cannot overcome me. So let's keep this video in mind for just a second and think about technically anything that is in a space of power above our own should be able to interact with it freely, right? It should be able to do whatever it's want. And technically, if there's malicious beings that hate us, we call them demons. We call them demons, and we call the leader of them the devil. And they hate us, they should be able to destroy us at will, right? They should be able to destroy us at will. So it's nothing within our realm that's keeping us safe. But it's the rules within their own realm that's keeping us safe. There's boundaries within their realm that's keeping us safe. We aren't keeping ourselves safe from these things. We aren't keeping ourselves safe from the devil. We aren't keeping ourselves safe from anything. There's something that's holding them back. We don't see it with our eyes, but every time we say the blood of Jesus, that affects their realm. Every time that we pray, that goes into their territory. And they are bound by rules in a place that we cannot see, because there's a God that is on our side that says, I know y'all are small. I know you think you're alone, but I'm here. And I've got a hedge of protection around my son. I've got a hedge of protection around my daughter. And y'all can't do anything until I give you the go ahead. They are bound not by our rules, but by the rules of our Father and the maker of everything. And this is important to know because this video is actually very helpful. And I'm almost done because I want to get practical. I'll get into more like doctrinal stuff next week. Okay, but I want to be immensely practical. The reason I like this video, Bryson, is because then it helps me to think about how do they work. And I think about my own experiences in life. Let's use that illustration. In the illustration, a 3D person can come in and take a 2D object, right? It can change it. But see, what if there was rules, Lynette, limiting how we could interact with that? And what if, in order to take the objects out of the safe, I couldn't just reach my hand in and do it, but I had to do it within the realm of the 2D? In other words, what if I was restricted in my capacity to interact to my capacity to draw? And I had to draw another character and get that character to interact with that person. And when that person's back was turned, get that character to take what's in their safe. This is why God advocates monogamy. I'm serious. This is why God gave us sexual regulations. This is why God said, be careful who you lie with. Be careful who you do things with. Don't be unequally yoked, because the devil, he wants what's in your safe. He wants what's yours. He wants everything you got, but he's restricted. So he has to play by a game that he doesn't want to play by. That's why when he goes to God, he says, wait, you got this hedge of protection around Job. I can't. I want to, but I can't take what's his. I want to afflict him, but I can't afflict him. And until you change the rules, so the devil has to operate through things that already exist in our realm. So what he does, and this is what I'm getting to the point, because I've seen this. As a pastor, I deal with broken people. I deal with people who, like, I see it every day, including in myself. I see how people are so deeply prophetic. And the most prophetic people that I know, the people who have the biggest callings, the people who God says the most about, the people that God seems to cherish the most, right? I know he loves us all equally, okay. The people that he seems to cherish the most, right? They're the most wounded people I know. They're the people who are hurt the most. They are the people who have faced some of the greatest suffering that I've ever seen in my life. They are the people who have to fight through the most trauma that I've ever seen. The people who have some of the greatest callings are some of the most wounded people that I know. I include myself in this. As I go forward, I'm not calling myself the greatest, I'm calling myself the most wounded. As I go forward in my calling, I see how I have to fight through so many wounds, so many hurts, so many anxieties and traumas that try to limit me. And what I realize is the devil doesn't like to play fair. If he could, he'd take everything from me. But that's not how he operated. See, what he did is he sent people in my youth to sow seeds in my psyche, to hurt me, to molest me, to wound me, to betray me, to make me not trust people. They did things because he said, I'm going to plant these seeds now so that I can call on him when he's doing what God called him to do. I'm going to sow these seeds now so that I can take what's in his safe in the future. Okay? What I'm really talking about today, in the last few minutes, I know this is weird, Brandon's family. How's it going, guys? I hope this isn't freaking you guys out too much. Let me just use you guys as an example. Use you as an example, Brandon. He came to the church today. This is a good example. This is how God interacts. Okay, I want to encourage you. This actually really encouraged me. Meeting you really encouraged me because I was in a funky place and I was, I'm doing all right, but my head can get twisted up. And sometimes because I'm so desperate for the intimacy of God, if there's even a day that goes by where I don't feel like he's using me or involved with me, I get all girly about it. Like, why didn't you call me, God? Right? He's here because he gave us a ride back from the gas station in the soaking rain. Now, it doesn't sound spectacular, but it is when you consider that the last time I invited my family to walk with me to the gas station was, I think, last year. Yeah, it was last year. It's been so long that because it's so much work, right, there's no point. And I figured I would take the kids if I took them, but I just wanted to walk to the gas station. But out of nowhere, I thought, I want my kids to come. I want my kids to come to the gas station. So I worked for 20 minutes to get them to go to the gas station. Do you guys want to walk to the gas station? Want to walk? And it's like about a 2-mile walk, a mile and a half, I don't know. It's about a mile plus walk to the gas station, and I take the wagon and I drag them, and it's in a big ordeal. But I'm like, you guys want to go? Let's walk to the gas station. Then Bryson's there, and I'm like, let's walk to the gas station. So we're all getting ready to walk to the gas station, and Rachel's like, let me check the weather. It's not going to rain. Rachel said that. She's like, it's not going to rain. So we're good. take an umbrella. I said, I'm taking an umbrella just in case, because it was drizzling that day. But I had this like overwhelming urge to walk to the gas station and take my family to the gas station. What's funny is I did not think Rachel would come because she doesn't. Normally she doesn't come. So I told Asher, oh, your mama's not coming. And she said, Mama's coming. I said, no, she's not. She never comes. I said, I'll bet you $10 she doesn't come. I bet Asher $10. Rachel goes, I'm coming. I'm coming. She hasn't been in years, y'all. Rachel has not walked in. I said, Rachel, you're not walking all the way down there in your house slippers with us. I know that's not happening. But because I bet her daughter $10 that she would not do it, this stubborn lady here had to walk in her house slippers all the way to the gas station just to prove me wrong. Okay? So we're walking all the way to the gas station. Things are great. I just think I'm going to get a Polar Pop. That's all I cared about, right? And we're going, and of course, it's a 20-minute ordeal turns into an hour ordeal with the kids and everything. We get there, and right when we get there, what happens? The second flood occurs. And it's just pouring, right? Now, being the person that I am, Brandon, I would have not said a word to you. I wouldn't have said anything to anybody. I just would have taken my wagon and moved on about my day and dragged my kids in the rain. So it's a miracle that my wife is there. It's a miracle that my wife is there. Just to agitate me, she's there. Because she strikes up a conversation with you. I don't talk to people I don't know. That's just, people know that about me. I'm not very social. I just would have been miserable in the rain. We would have never met. So my wife had to be there. She had to be there. I had to go to the gas station, and my wife had to be there. When she's there, she said, oh, this is a bad day. And this amazing gentleman says, do you need a ride? And I'm first like, who's trying to murder my hot wife? That's like the first... and I'm looking at him and I'm like, yeah, you want to give her a ride? Wait till you see the rest of us. I know you're just, right? That's my thought, right? But he's like, no, man, I'll put your wagon in the back of my car. I'll put you in there. Like this just immensely generous guy. And I'm like, all right, sure. And me, part of me wants to walk in the rain by myself, just to be stubborn, just to like drag my wagon and say, take the kids. But I get in the car and I'm like, all right, and then we start to talking, and here's this amazing guy just talking to us, telling us a story. He's a believer, right? He's a believer, talks about church, like he pulls in, takes us home. We get the chance to pray with him. Then he says, you know what, I'm gonna come to your church on Sunday, and I'm gonna bring my family to your church, right? And I thought of that video. And it comforted me. Because it let me know the light was with me. The light was with me. The light didn't tell me that I'd meet somebody named Brandon and I'd get to pray with him and he would come. That's not what the light did. The light said, hey, Brad, you want a Polar Pop? You want a Polar Pop. You want a nice cherry Coke with crushed ice in it, bro. That's what you want. And for some reason, you want to drag your annoying kids with you. And the light said to Rachel, you want to annoy your husband. This is what you want to do. You want to annoy your husband and go on the walk with him. And I got home, and after we met you, Brandon, I was like, man, God, that is how the good works from that realm. That's how the light works in that realm. Would it surprise you if I told you that happens to us over and over and over and over again? God will plant inside of me appetites. There's times I've just wanted fish and chips, so I go to a British place, and all of a sudden we end up praying with the pregnant woman and have all these different things. We have story after story where God uses us. Now, what does that tell me? Because there's nothing that's inherently miraculous about us meeting and talking and everything, if you want to be purely naturalistic about it. So what did God accomplish in that? I truly believe that prayer is a rule changer. I believe that it's a game changer. I believe that when we met him in his act of kindness, now he doesn't know I believe this until this moment, but I think that he sowed a seed into a prophetic and apostolic family that he doesn't even realize will be returned to him. I believe that as you sow, so shall you reap. And God gave him the same opportunity. So now he has seed in the ground, and the rules in that realm are changing in his favor. They're moving in his direction. He thinks he was just being nice, but all of a sudden he doesn't know who he got to pray for him. He doesn't know know who we are. He was just being kind, but he gave a prophet something, and he's going to receive a prophet's reward. That's how the light works. And I needed that, Minister Greg, because I just needed it. I needed to know that not only did God use me to come preach, which is great, and it's awesome, but I needed to know he uses me unconsciously. I needed to know that I'm a tool in his hand, and he can drive my appetites and drive where I go. And even when I feel irritated, he's gonna work despite it, and he's gonna work through me and my wife. He's gonna work through all of that to do what he does. And see, the reason that I know that God is working through us is because the product is light. The product is love. The product is fruitfulness and prayer. The product drives orientation towards him. And the enemy does the exact opposite. The enemy does the exact opposite. You want to know if it's the enemy working in your life? If the person takes you away from the things of God, if they start sowing seeds to get you to think differently about God, if they're trying to pull you out of church, if they're trying to pull you out of the house of God, if they're trying to minimize your prayer life, then you know that it's the wrong seed. And see, this is where I'm finishing. I'm finishing here, okay? Whereas that's an example of how God works, here's an example of how the devil works. The devil will see something about you, Derek, that he needs to deal with. Something will get exposed. He can't see everything, but he can see a lot. And once he sees that God is going to use you, he's got to start working. And the sooner that he can see that, the earlier he can work. This is why so many of us were hurt in childhood. We think it's just happenstance. We think we just happened across a bad person. We think that uncle that molested us was just a bad uncle. No, he was sent from hell, right? I use that example because, believe it or not, I've heard countless stories of parishioners who were brought to church by a family member on a Sunday and molested when they got home by that same family member. The devil does not play fair, y'all. He does not care about rules. He's restricted by, and the only thing that he can use to try to distort and disrupt you is what God has already created. In other words, another person. He cannot create life. He cannot make things anew. All he can do is distort it. I'm gonna go back to one more Lord of the Rings reference, okay? I've been really digging J.R.R. Tolkien lately. You don't know it if you've only seen the movies or read The Lord of the Rings, but there's a whole backstory that takes place. Sauron is the bad guy in Lord of the Rings, but he was a servant of another bad guy called Morgoth. Anybody know this? Nobody's similar to Joy? Of course you do, you nerd. I love you. The Silmarillion. So he's the bad guy for a guy named Morgoth. And it's very interesting because J.R.R. Tolkien was a Christian, and he wrote all of this kind of informing out of his Christian background, informing his world. And it's fascinating because the way that Morgoth has to operate, like he can't create anything on his own. He can only distort what was already created. So instead of like creating a race that will serve him, what he does is he kidnaps elves, tortures them, and keeps them and tortures them for years and years and years. And he keeps them in such darkness and bondage that they eventually become something else. They morph into something else. And then they begin to breed out of that morphing. And they begin to replicate out of their hurt and pain. And before you know it, the elves are no longer, and here come the orcs. And the reason that I use that example is because that's exactly what the devil does to people. That's exactly what he does. He tries to capture them. He can't create anything, so he can only distort and destroy what's created. So he takes that and he manipulates and he abuses and he hurts and he tries to, have you ever wondered why the profile of serial killers always comes from abusive homes? Right? They always have domineering, abusive mothers or fathers. They've always had backgrounds that don't justify their actions, but sure help explain it, right? Because pain begets pain, begets pain, begets pain. And when pain is uninterrupted by the cross, it begets hell itself. It actually produces hell on earth. See, the good thing about you is your pain is interrupted by the cross. Your trauma is disturbed by the cross. You can't be dragged to hell. You can't be owned by the devil. Your destiny can't be claimed. There's nothing he can do about it. And when you're a child of light, you're going to do what God wants you to do. Now, who's the only person that can slow down your destiny and stop your destiny? You. You. So how the devil likes to operate, and I'm finished. I know this is loose. He wants to get you when your psychology can be most formed, most messed with. He wants to put you in that church that's gonna hurt you. He wants to put you in that marriage that's gonna fail. He wants to put you with that person that's gonna traumatize and make you mistrust people. And because he can't stop your destiny, but he can slow down its impact. He can minimize its width. He can shallow it out some. He can't stop you from being saved, but he can stop you from saving as many people as God called you to save. If he can get you on an island, he'll send you to an island, Paul. If he can do anything to disrupt your plans, he's succeeding in his eyes, because though he can't own you, he can limit you. Now the game is not about you and your soul, Derek and Shay. It's about preventing your testimony. It's about stopping you from being the impact that you're supposed to do. If he can get you to impact one family, he can live with that. He's not gonna let you impact 1,000. He's not gonna let you impact 10,000. He's gonna do everything he can to traumatize you, to make God a liar, to make you lost in your doubts, to make you lost in your concerns, to make you struggle with the realities of this life so that you don't peer behind it and change the rules of the real place. All right, I'm done. Rachel, so I'll say this. We have to, as believers, not to just be religious, not to just go to church, not to just, even when it comes to spiritual warfare, pray and fast. There's a couple things that we have to be conscious of. One of the biggest things that I have to do as a servant of God is be conscious of my own hurts and my own traumas. And I have to do a backward searching through my life to see why I am the way I am. I love God with all my heart, but there's things about me that just aren't right. Like there's anger. George, my childhood friend said, yeah. Oh, you want me to point out you, bro? We're a great example. Both of us are called by God. Both of us have destiny since childhood. And both of us have gone through hell. Both of us have gone through drug addiction. George has been shot 5 times, in and out of prison. Do you mind me saying that? He's in and out of, well, I already said it, bro. I'm sorry. I just pulled a Paula on that one. Because the enemy wants to waste as much of his time as possible and keep him as bogged down with nonsense as possible and keep him as traumatized. And what happens is when you deal with enough problems, you start looking at the problem and you get lost in Mirkwood Forest. You get lost in the middle of the problems, and all of a sudden, you're not going to hell. God doesn't love you any less, but you are alone on an island with this light that the world desperately needs. And if you stay alone on an island, the enemy succeeded to the extent of his victory can succeed in your life. So one of our objectives as a Christian is to look in the deep recesses of our being and allow God to heal our traumas. Allow God to heal. And I know that it sounds easier than it actually is, but let me give you a practical example and I'll be done. I went 7 minutes over so far. I'll be done. I promise you I'm done. So I got back from Ghana a couple years ago, elder, and I'm going through this process now. I got back from Ghana a couple years ago, elder, and I stayed in the bathtub, and it was like 3 a.m. Something happened, and it was one of the strongest rebukes from God I ever got, because I was in the middle of talking to him, right? And normally when I'm talking to, like just praying, but conversationally praying, it's all good, and God's like, I love you, Brad. But this was a rebuke, and he told me I wasn't grateful. He told me I wasn't grateful for life. He said, I didn't owe you life. He said, I didn't owe you life. And he said, one of your biggest thing is you need to be grateful for life, because for so many years, life was so painful that I was like, I would rather not. It's the not. And I thought that was just me thinking, right? But God began to point out how that actually infected my very soul. Like it reached, Rachel, you yelled, yeah, the loudest in that sermon, my Lord. That was the loudest yeah today. I know, she knows me. It's an infection. And it's an infection that's so deep that I began to realize that it's impacted me in such profound ways. And that in some ways it's allowed me to carry a covenant with death. It's allowed me to carry a covenant with death that they expected. I began to consent with my own destruction. Even as I began to preach, even as I began to proclaim God, there was something deep in me that consented with my own absence, my own irrelevance, my own destruction. And God has to go to the deepest places. And one of the processes that I'm working through now is I having to consciously override my ungratefulness and my disgratitude towards life. I have to consciously be aware of my feelings when I begin to say, I'd rather not even exist. I'd rather not deal with it. I don't even know why I'm here. And I don't care where you're at in life. If you've been through some things, no matter what you're doing, you can have those feelings. You can begin to deal with those feelings. And the thing is that they run so deep from experiences that you've had that the enemy will use you. He will use you to consent with his plans for your life. And so God said, son, learn to be grateful. Learn to be grateful for what I've given you. Learn it. That means treat it like a task. That means do it even when you don't feel it. That means make it a discipline before it's a delight. Learn to be grateful for what I've given you. And I will deal with some things that the enemy has planned for you that you're not even aware of. All right.